The United States is the only country in the world to have used nuclear weapons against another nation. The U.S. military dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the final stages of World War II, when Japan was already considering a surrender. Those atomic attacks left over 200,000 people dead. Over 7 decades later, America has the largest stockpile of active nuclear warheads and a $1 trillion plan to modernize it, despite international calls for total nuclear disarmament. The U.S. military has also been making sure that it can deliver its weapons of mass destruction anywhere in the world. It has been test-firing modernized intercontinental missiles that can carry atomic warheads. The latest test firing was conducted on May 3, just 7 days after a similar launch from an airbase in California. The U.S. launched Minuteman III ballistic missiles toward the Marshall Islands. The missile has been developed as part of America's overhaul of its nukes and delivery systems.
As time has passed and others have developed this technology as well, the flexing of U.S. muscle across the world has incentivized others to take up the same kind of arms in order to defend themselves. Had the U.S. not carried out such blatant empire building, I sincerely doubt we would have seen as much proliferation of nuclear weapons that we see today.
The U.S. Air Force says the tests show that America is prepared to use nuclear weapons whenever, wherever it deems necessary. Observers say today the possibility of a nuclear attack is even worse than the days of the Cold War, when nukes were strictly considered as a form of deterrence. The grave threat America's nuclear weapons are posing to international peace and security should be given special attention. That's because America is currently involved in several conflicts, such as in Syria, Yemen, and Somalia. It has military presence in many parts of the world, and it is threatening to take military action against nuclear-armed North Korea. The United States still argues its nuclear force is a deterrent against its enemies, but observers say that the argument is implausible because America is using it as a means of intimidation and domination. The United States is one of the 5 nuclear weapons states recognized by the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The NPT demands all nuclear weapon states, which are also the permanent members of the UN Security Council, to move towards total nuclear disarmament. But the 5 states have been going in the opposite direction, as all of them are overhauling their nukes. The nuclear arms modernization drive is spearheaded by America.
Well, I definitely think that it's the United States' fault that this situation has arisen. Ever since the end of the Soviet Union, they were able to reign across most of the world completely unchallenged, where nuclear weapons were not really necessary for them, considering that the main power that had them, Russia, was no longer in a position where they could really challenge U.S. hegemony.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he wants America to be top of the pack when it comes to nuclear arms. Back in March, the U.S. led dozens of countries in boycotting talks at the UN on an international treaty to ban nuclear weapons. Washington has also blocked efforts aimed at creating a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East because it does not want its close ally Israel to be brought under the microscope. Washington's stances on nuclear arms are seen as the greatest impediment to international disarmament efforts.
It was a surprising piece of news that sent shockwaves among human rights groups and activists. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization held its global forum in Saudi Arabia. The prestigious event provided a good PR opportunity for Riyadh to divert public attention away from its bleak rights situation.
Well, I see the UN as trying to validate the actions of Saudi Arabia to an international audience, albeit with very minimal success. Everybody with internet access has been able to see the horrific crimes that Saudi Arabia has committed on the people of Yemen. The absolute indiscriminate bombing with massive death tolls.
But it's been harshly criticized by rights groups. The Human Rights Watch has described it as a slap in the face of more than a dozen Saudi detainees languishing in Saudi jails. Their crime? Trying to set up independent organizations in the Arab Kingdom.
What the United Nations has become is nothing more for a platform for the United States propaganda to beam its message throughout the world.
This is not the first time Saudi Arabia has been rewarded for its brutal crackdown on dissent and violating the rights of its citizens.
And Saudi Arabia, as far as being an independent state, has become nothing more than a puppet state of American foreign policy.
Back in April, Saudi Arabia was voted onto a UN panel dedicated to promoting women's rights across the globe.
It is a complete joke, but I don't see this as bowing to Saudi pressure. More, I see this as a token gesture of cooperation between America and Saudi Arabia.
And this despite insurmountable evidence of the systematic violations of human rights in the kingdom. And in 2016, then UN Chief Ban Ki-moon removed Saudi Arabia from the list of the violators of the rights of children.
This was one of the most painful and difficult decisions I have had to make. The report describes horrors no child should have to face. At the same time, I also had to consider the very real prospect that millions of other children would suffer grievously if, as was suggested to me, countries would defund many UN programs.
Despite with it's using the pretext as Yemen as its war on terror, despite it being very publicly documented that Saudi Arabia is one of the bigger financiers of international terrorism throughout the world.
Is this becoming a trend to reward Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia would not be able to function without the support of Britain and America. America and Britain, between them, give Saudi Arabia enough weapons and enough cash to keep the regime alive.
Saudi Arabia has a bleak rights record. Its deadly aggression against Yemen has left thousands of people, including many women and children, dead. It's helping Bahrain, another dictatorial regime in the Middle East, suppress pro-democracy protesters. And it's financially and militarily sponsoring terrorists in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere.
I see what they've done with this appointment to the United Nations Women's Council. It's actually more of a token gesture, which is a complete insult to any woman who is in Saudi Arabia, who is living their life with next to no rights and no voice.
Is the international community bowing to Saudi pressure due to its petrodollars?